Judging by the analytics on my game design video, a lot of you are probably old enough to remember an internet before Reddit. If you're like me, you probably distinctly remember discussing games you liked with your fellow gamers on forums like this, or like this, or like this. I definitely remember using starman.net. Yeah, feel free to consider that my coming out as an autist, and not the smart savant kind either. I mean the one that has a meltdown if his tendies touch his mashed potatoes on his plate. Anyway, starman.net wasn't something you could really stumble upon that easily. If you're just Googling Earthbound, you probably wouldn't find it. You'd have to get pretty deep in some web pages and comment sections to even find a mention of it, or stumble into it while looking up something really specific, like Earthbound all battle backgrounds PNGs or something. Basically, it was something you'd only find if you were already invested in the game beyond just a surface level. And that was a standard for a while. Lots of smaller forums dedicated to specific games or franchises or dev studios. They were generally off the beaten path, so the ones who frequented these forums were real fans, not just passers-by. But then something changed, something that made these fan bases a lot more accessible for normies too. To understand why this happened, we have to look at two key traits about normies that made this next part inevitable. First trait, you love social media. You love getting personal, individualized attention for your profile and your identity specifically. Things you don't get on more anonymized forum-type sites. And number two, you're not tech-savvy. At least not with anything beyond a smartphone. You don't want to have to juggle a bunch of passwords or use a password manager. It's way too difficult. And anything longer than a 4-digit iPhone passkey is right out. Luckily for normies everywhere, a certain site rose to prominence that alleviated both of these. A convenient, centralized site where you're treated more like a social media user than a forum user. You can flaunt your interests more easily, have everything traced back to you and your identity specifically. Oh, and even make a heckin' snoo avatar. Because of the forum-light nature of Reddit, a lot of communities for games began to form there. Then, by virtue of being on a well-trafficked site, they outgrew the original forums and became the new de facto site for fans of a franchise, taking most of the fan base with it. Now you might be wondering what the issue is. The fan base moved from one site to another. Who cares? That happens all the time for a whole slew of reasons. It's not going to start killing fandoms. So I did a little experiment, just Googling Earthbound. No qualifiers, no special search settings, just the name Earthbound. I wanted to see how long it would take me to find r/Earthbound and how long it would take me to find starman.net. The latter gets a DNF for its score. Google cut me off after 20 pages, all without a single starman.net link. r/Earthbound, though, that was result number 6. Number 5 if you don't count the Earthbound Trading Company website. I want you to really think about what this means. In just 6 results, someone can go from not even knowing what Earthbound is to being able to post on what is now the premier Earthbound fan site. Now, I want you to try something for me. Find a game, go to its subreddit, and just search first time or wish me luck or some variation of that. You'll probably find a lot of posts containing photos of some early game area or the title screen saying, oh, I'm playing this for the first time, make sure you wish me luck and give me lots of upvotes. Literally that meme about Earthbound fan excited to play for the first time. Now, that should be a huge red flag to anyone who actually feels any semblance of passion towards video games. These supposed fans are so excited for this game that they linger on the title screen, snap a picture, and use it to post it for internet clout. If they were really passionate, if they really wanted to play it, wouldn't they actually be playing it rather than trying to milk karma from literally doing the bare minimum? Shouldn't they want to play it instead of getting attention from literal strangers? Well, no, that's the thing. They don't want to play it. They don't care about the game. They care about the prestige and the validation they get by accessorizing with it. And the poor saps on Reddit don't know any better, so they upvote and leave comments like, oh man, it's such a great game, you're gonna love it. After all, if you said, who cares, or come back when you're finished, that would be gatekeeping, and everyone knows only right-wing chuds do that. No, we have to pretend that the opinion of someone who knows Halo inside and out is just as valid as the opinion of someone who joined the subreddit after skimming through a top 10 coolest swords in video games list that mentioned the energy sword, and now thinks they're a Halo fan. I wish I could say no harm, no foul, but these passionless fake fan redditors can drain a community of its lifeblood. Gamers as a whole, but especially more specific subsets like fans of a specific game, thrive on dedication and passion. When someone's passionate about something, it's infectious. Someone telling you how much they like a game, or even a specific part of it, can help give you a new appreciation for it. They might encourage you to use an unorthodox loadout, or to notice an extremely minute detail you would have otherwise overlooked, or just to play through it again to relive what made you love it in the first place. You don't get a community like that when someone who hasn't even played one of the entries can waltz in and just start posting as if they're part of the same club. That's how your game, or whatever your community revolves around, goes from something you care about and cherish to an accessory and an aesthetic. I've said accessory a couple times already, so what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the tourists in a fandom don't actually care about the game itself, or the film, or the show, or whatever. They just like the idea of it. Think of the huge influx of alleged D&D fans as a result of Stranger Things and Critical Role, and then a few years later, Baldur's Gate 3. These people began inserting themselves in those circles, not because they cared about what D&D was, but because, oh, that's what I saw on Netflix, or oh, that's what my favorite VAs play on their podcast, or because it was, the topic of the hottest video game at the time. They care now at that moment because it's cool, it's an aesthetic. It gives them some degree of status in the eyes of their equally shallow friends. Now, I'm sure there are definitely people who end up legitimately passionate about the game in spite of how they discovered it, but those are few and far between, and don't begin to counteract the sheer volume of normies flooding in. So now the fandom is filled with tourists in search of an aesthetic. What happens next? Well, usually they start to realize that the reality doesn't quite line up with their expectations. Let's use D&D again, since it's such a clear example of this sort of parasitism. So Critical Role is a podcast that emphasizes roleplay over the other aspects, like crunching numbers or mechanics or just learning the game. The DM does voices, carefully plans out every facet of the experience. It's produced a lot more like a theatrical performance in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. So when these Critical Role fans who now enter the D&D fandom actually try to play it, and they find out that they can't just roleplay their Mary Sue character to victory, they have to actually abide by the mechanics and the rules, they don't like that, so they demand the game get dumber and more watered down to suit them. And of course, there's also the wokeness aspect, and I'm sure plenty of said tourists will deny it exists. Critical Role is produced by some very left-wing people, which definitely does bleed through into their podcast. And of course, it follows that their fans, including those who end up looking into D&D outside of the podcast, will also be very left-wing. That left-wing bias of Reddit is also worth mentioning. Even if you hate everything I say next, you have to at least admit that it's a fact that Reddit is run primarily by a few admins and a few power mods, and most of them are left-leaning. And because of this left-leaning bias, the rules aren't really evenly enforced between people on either side of the political spectrum, so the end result is a group that quickly becomes a self-perpetuating left-wing echo chamber. And when these already progressive users and new from Critical Role start looking into D&D, they'll find these things, mechanics, lore, you name it, that they find offensive or problematic. And so actual fans of D&D, the ones who really care about the game, they don't mind these things, not because they support slavery or eugenics or whatever crazy accusation the left is throwing at D&D, but because they like D&D for what it is, not some fantasy version that bends to their worldview specifically. All those facets of the game, messy as they are what make it the game they enjoy. They don't feel they need to change it in order to like it. They already like it. It's fine as is. Of course, the tourists outnumber the real dedicated fans, which is why Wizards of the Coast bends the knee and starts renaming phylacteries, changing race-related terms, making Mexican orcs, and posting art like this, which I'm sure definitely represents the demographics that play D&D the most. And the ones who actually care about D&D, they have to watch their hobby get shat on and leave for a new hobby, only for the cycle to repeat there too. It happened to D&D, it happened to Warhammer, and it'll keep on happening over and over again. This is all by design too. The entertainment industry doesn't want to make art anymore, they want to make content. They want soulless, disposable, non-committal works because not only can they just shove whatever monetization and political propaganda they want, but because they can also easily lure you away to the next piece of content. If you're a real fan of something, you'll start complaining when they begin changing what you liked about it, when they remove the problematic elements or denigrate the elements you love from the original, or make soulless spin-offs or sequels. That's what gets fans to complain. Tourists, on the other hand, they don't care. They'll pay up and consume their goy slop because they're so demoralized and lacking in passion and critical thinking. That's why they love to emasculate traditional heroes or spit on whatever property is being turned into content. They want a following not of fans, but of demoralized consumer bugmen. Part of the reason you see so many franchises getting dumbed down is to appeal to this shallow, uninvested crowd. Normies don't want something challenging. They want something that's easy to mindlessly consume and then say, look guys, I did it, I'm a real fan. That's why games as a whole have gotten a lot easier over the years, to appeal to normies who lack the mental strength or willpower to persevere through something that they might not get at first. It's also why they've gotten samier. Mechanics like dodge rolling and parrying are ubiquitous, in part because someone who plays one game with those mechanics will already have a baseline understanding moving on to the next slop game that uses those same mechanics. And I just don't mean games are getting easier from a gameplay perspective either. The Silent Hill series had one of the most egregious shifts in story and tone in order to appeal to normies. I'm not going to recount the whole Silent Hill series for you, but I will say that Silent Hill 2, by far the most popular and well-known entry, is extremely detached from the lore of the first game and the following two, at least compared to the original quadrilogy of games. So the strange phenomena in Silent Hill is because of its spiritual history from before the settlers founded the town, as well as a cult known as the Order, which was seeking to revive an old god the natives worshipped. This cult is responsible for the events of 1, 3, and 4. It even gets some vague allusions in the Rebirth ending of Silent Hill 2. Now, Silent Hill 2 is a great game and probably the best in the franchise, so I'm not saying any of this disparagingly, but if your only exposure to Silent Hill was video essays about how Silent Hill 2 is absolute cinema or something, you really wouldn't know all this. All the background lore about the town and its history from the first game, the third game, and some of the fourth, you wouldn't know any of that. So how did Konami decide to handle this? To understand that, we need to look at Silent Hill: A Short Message. Basically, all you need to know, it was a terrible Silent Hill game released for free in anticipation of the Silent Hill 2 remake. The main point I want to address is the Silent Hill phenomenon, in which they gave a very questionable canon explanation for Silent Hill's fog world. Yeah, it's not caused by the rituals conducted by societies long since past, or the Order's attempts to use Alessa Gillespie as a vessel, or even some ambiguous magic that exists in the town. No, it's caused by the stress brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Oh, you guys remember COVID-19, right? Oh my gosh, just like Silent Hill. It's so relatable and easily digestible now. It's something Redditors and normies can soy face over because it's something they already understand and already have a frame of reference for. Silent Hill 2 has one of the best stories in gaming, and it explained very little of the mechanisms behind James's experience. It didn't need to be relatable and entirely understandable. In fact, the story worked in part because it was so ambiguous in places. That's why it's horror. You're not supposed to be able to fully understand it. If you think the plot needed to be reworked as James, Angela, and Eddie were all just seeing things because anti-maskers made them sad, then you're not a Silent Hill fan. You're a golem that wants easily digestible slop shoveled down your throat. It's no coincidence that these tourist, fake fans, whatever you want to call them, also screech the loudest when something gets criticized. Real fans, the ones who care about a product or a franchise, have high standards for it. They're passionate about it, so when a new update or spin-off or sequel comes out that doesn't meet those standards set by older works, they speak out about it. You know, they've been following the franchise for a while, so they know how much potential it has to be great. Take Dragon Age, for instance. Fans of the original two games saw the direction Veilguard was taking and voiced their displeasure. They could see it was missing what made the original run special, and was taking a direction that stripped away its identity and uniqueness. The tourists who labeled themselves Dragon Age fans because Veilguard was a shiny new thing, they didn't have that experience. They never saw the peaks of the franchise, so they had no point of reference for why someone wouldn't like the newest entry. According to them, the negativity wasn't because of the terrible writing, shallow story, dumbed-down gameplay, missing mechanics. No, the only reason people hate it was because they're unhinged culture war losers. Again, the end goal of this isn't to have art that can be discussed or compared, and certainly not critiqued. It's content. It's slop you're not supposed to think critically about. And that's happily enforced by the tourists, and depending on what happens, this becomes a new normal. But not always. With Veilguard, it managed to flop so hard that the director was laid off and the studio behind it closed. That response was enough for the tourists to eventually drop it. That's why the consensus on Veilguard is a lot more negative on the subreddit now than it was when it first released. It's no longer the cool new thing, and its use of signaling holding the right values dried up. But this is far from the norm. The tourists pretty much always win. It's not always a huge influx caused by a new entry or a reboot, but it's a gradual drip feed from the rest of the normie internet and Reddit as a whole, and that's always going to happen, so it's only a matter of time. And everything I said about the left-wing bias, the insistence on toxic positivity, the rejection of critical thinking, it's all pretty much enforced in any community that's majority normie, which most are. Obviously, mass report and content exists, but that's something present on most sites. No, I'm talking about Reddit's equivalent of the like-dislike system. Like YouTube and other social media, well-liked comments are pushed up to the top of most pages. Unlike those sites, though, Reddit actually hides downvoted comments, meaning that not only will the normies dogpile you for going against their consensus, but your comment will also now be hidden on the basis of wrongthink. And look, this next part doesn't apply to me. I frankly don't care how many of you hate me or my content. But when getting mass downvoted, a lot of other people, like the real fans who haven't woken up to the normification of their gaming communities, they will feel bad or ashamed at getting downvoted, and even start questioning if they belong in their fan base anymore, thus leaving and pushing the dynamic even further in favor of the normies. What really gets me is that this so easily could have been avoided. If people responded to accusations of gatekeeping with, "Yeah, I am, deal with it," instead of, "Oh, I'm so sorry, come on in," maybe the fan circles I cared about could have held out a little longer. One thing Redditors love to harp on is the archetype of a fake gamer girl. No, I don't mean they criticize these types of people, I mean they criticize people who believe they exist. They can't stand the thought that someone might be wary of newcomers to a fandom, especially not a woman. To them, the height of sexism is saying, "Oh, you're a Legend of Zelda fan? Then name 5 dungeons in Ocarina of Time," which, for the record, I doubt most users of Harsh/Zelda Zelda could do. So that was near universally painted as a pretentious, elitist, and bigoted outlook to have. But maybe if we didn't write it off so quickly, if we actually did test someone's knowledge and dedication before welcoming them into a fan base, we wouldn't be where we are now. Tons of entitled losers entering into fandoms they have no place in, demanding the world change to suit them, and being totally above reproach. There are still some small communities still kicking, still detached from Reddit. These are the places you should seek out if you're a real fan of something, not some overly moderated slop site that'll happily make room in fandoms for people who don't really care about it. But even those forums aren't safe. Maybe if we stop treating gatekeeping like a four-letter word, these places could continue to thrive for people, not consumers who actually do care about something. But until that happens, I'm not holding my breath. Alright, that's about it. Do the things the algorithm likes, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.